They thought Earth was just another savage world. Unstable weather, aggressive wildlife, primitive natives clinging to survival. But they were wrong. So very wrong. Earth isn't just hostile, it's alive. It remembers. And it never forgets who heard it. One by one. The stars are going dark, and the last message every ship hears is a whisper from deep space. You shouldn't have come here. He ran into the emergency outpost screaming. His eyes were wild, skin burned, suit torn open at the chest, and in his hands he carried the blood-soaked helmet of his commander. He collapsed at their feet, gasps broke out among the medics. He tried to speak, choked on his own breath, then finally, lips. He whispered one word, Earth. And then he passed out cold. Nobody had heard that name before, not in any star chart, not in any galactic records. Not even in the restricted systems database, so when the Galactic Union traced the last jump, coordinates from his wrecked ship, they found it a strange blue planet, floating quietly in an unmarked system, M-class atmosphere, oxygen-rich, no satellites, no signs of spaceflight it looked. Harmless but first impressions, Litha. Council met. Within the hour, senators, fleet generals, first contact specialists. They reviewed the footage taken from the survivor's half-burned body cam. It started normally. The team dropped into low orbit. No resistance, no defense grid, just oceans, forests, mountain ranges that stretched for thousands of kilometers. They landed in the northern continent. Thick trees, dense fog, signs of ruins. Nothing high-tech, no power readings, no ships, no life signs. The perfect place for a peaceful contact mission. They were wrong. 3 hours into the mission, the first team member disappeared. No sound, no distress call. 1 minute she was scanning a moss-covered structure, the next gone. Then the animals came, not fleeing like prey, not watching like predators, but approaching, walking, staring, as if they were testing the intruders. One creature, large, with 4 eyes and a jaw that split sideways, walked straight into the camp unarmed. Comtha. Security drones fired, warning shots. It didn't flinch. The second officer tried to speak to it. The translator failed. The sound it made wasn't language, it was a vibration, a pulse, low, long, unnatural. Then the storm hit. Not a normal storm, not wind or water. This storm moved with intelligence. It circled the camp like it was hunting them. The footage shook violently. Lightning that burned sideways, rain that hissed like acid. One by one, they screamed, not from injuries, but from something else, to were panic hallucinations. The survivor ran his camera. Spun branches reached for him. The trees moved. He screamed and kept screaming right up until the last second of the recording. The last thing the footage caught was a sound, not thunder, not wind, but something deep, low, and alive. It vibrated. The whole screen rattled. The bones of every council member watching. Then silence. That was when the council realized this planet wasn't unknown. It was a race stand now. It was waking up again. They dispatched a high-level recon ship the next day, armed, prepared with combat AI and stealth systems. Its mission? Observe from orbit only. No landings, no direct contact. The ship entered the atmosphere and vanished from all scanners, gone without even a distress. Pink, the Union flag. The entire sector is red level. Quarantined to late. Curious fringe explorers had already heard the rumors. Whispers of a Deathworld, untouched, unclaimed, a place that devoured every ship that entered. They wanted to see it for themselves. One returned, a smuggler captain, hard, unshaken by most things, but not this time. His report was short. The stars felt further away, near Earth. The sky was wrong. Time didn't move normally, and his crew heard voices, voices that mimicked the people they lost. Voices from home. He never opened his cargo hold again. He swore something followed him back. The Galactic Union tried to silence the rumors, tried to hide the footage, even erase the coordinates again, but the word was Oterthanaut, just a Deathworld. Deathworld, a planet that had survived. Something and never healed. Something had happened there long ago, something no one remembered. But the planet did. Never forgot it, never forgave it. Wasn't sleeping anymore. Ports came in of strange signals, bouncing off deep space buoys, random chaotic, but when processed through Union cryptography, it formed a single phrase: "We are awake." The Council ordered emergency protocols. Every nearby colony evacuated, trade routes, diverted, exploration missions shut down, but it didn't stop. The dreams, more and more civilians, scientists, soldiers, even AI cores, all began reporting the same nightmare: forest, a sky with no stars, a presence watching from beneath the ground, and always at the end a voice that asked, "Why did you come back?" One could answer: because no one knew why Earth had been abandoned or who abandoned it, or if Earth even belonged to the galaxy at all. One senator suggested diplomacy. He was laughed out of the chamber. You don't negotiate with something that remembers your crimes. You don't talk to the ground under your feet if it decides you don't belong. There you run, you hide, and you pray it stays asleep. But this time, Earth was not going to sleep again. Not now, not ever. Deep beneath its crust in caves older than the galaxy itself, something had begun to stir. Metal veins pulsed with light, old machines hummed, and the sky over the forests darkened. Even at noon, not from clouds, but from wings, massive silent wings. The footage from the last Explorer drone came in 24 hours later, edited, uncut, but corrupted. Full of static jumps and whispers, it showed trees that moved without wind, rivers that flowed uphill, and a single human figure standing still in the center of a ruined city. He wasn't breathing, wasn't blinking, but his mouth was open, as if singing. The drone got closer, his eyes opened. All black, no whites, no pupils. The drone crashed before it could transmit more, but the last frame was clear: a shadow behind the humana shape. Tall, twisted, older. Then Logikit reached out and touched the camera, and then the screen went black. The engineers swore there was no physical reason the drone failed. No impact, no overload, just stopped working. No one dared build another. Now Earth sits alone in space. Quiet, cold, blue, waiting, and somewhere on that cursed planet, something watches the stars and remembers who tried to burn it long ago. Because Earth is not just a place, it is a survivor, a judge, and maybe something worse. It doesn't matter what species you are or how powerful your fleet is. If you land on Earth, you will not return the same if you return at all. And in the final seconds of the only surviving footage ever recovered from orbit, right before the screen glitches into black static, there is a sound: low, rumbling, hungry, a growl that does not end, a growl that does not fade, a growl that means one thing. Something massive is awakened. It is staring straight up at the stars, straight at us, waiting for us to make the next move. Waiting to see if we remember what we did to it before it shows us what it became. The science vessel entered Earth's orbit quietly, as if afraid to be noticed, its hull reflecting the pale blue of the planet below, the stars dimming slightly as they drew closer. Sensors came online, data streamed across glowing screens. Everything about the planet looked perfect on the surface. It was rich with oxygen, stable magnetic fields, balanced temperature gradients, water covering most of its surface. Gravity just a little heavier than average, but well within tolerable ranges for most species. It seemed ideal, almost too ideal. Dar Alera Jen was leading the analysis team, a xenobiologist from the Trilaris system. Known for her calm logic and sharp focus, she stared at the live readouts, puzzled by what she saw the air samples showed. Too much oxygen, not dangerously high, but unnaturally perfect ratios of nitrogen, trace gases, carbon dioxide, and something else, something they could not identify. The computer flagged the atmosphere as breathable, then added a warning: the air was not just sustaining, it was energizing. Hyper-efficient molecular bonds, strange particles that accelerated metabolic functions. The crew ran a simulation and saw the results. Humans would be faster, stronger, more alert in this air than in any environment ever recorded in the galaxy. But it wasn't just humans. Any biological life would become more active, as if the planet was not only supporting life but pushing it forward. They had seen planets like this before, terraformed worlds, made by the old civilizations, tailored for specific species, designed carefully and artificially, but Earth showed no signs of terraforming, no ancient machines, no orbital rings, no energy scars in the crust. It looked natural and possibly so, and then the anomalies began. The navigation AI reported small gravitational pulses coming from different points on the planet. It's almost like the planet was breathing, shifting subtly in patterns that made no sense. The magnetic field around Earth also fluctuated, slightly changing intensity in strange rhythms. The crew began to feel it too. First, it was just a headache, a pressure in their ears. Then strange dreams began. One engineer claimed he saw forests inside his quarters. Another kept hearing whispers. In languages he did not speak, Dr. Jen herself began to see things, flashes of memory that were not hers, memories of fire, of ancient cities, buried deep underground, of skies filled with screaming things that moved too fast to see clearly. They decided to send a drone down to the surface. It landed in a valley surrounded by thick jungle. The trees were enormous, twisting into the clouds with leaves. It's the size of small vehicles. The moment the drone touched the ground, its sensors went wild. The soil was alive, pulsing with microbial energy, unlike anything cataloged before. The plants reacted to its presence. Some turned toward it, as if watching others. Released small clouds of spores that glowed faintly in the camera feed. The drone moved forward and found something even stranger, a clearing filled with bones. Not just animal bones, but structures made from them, tall arches and pillars, carefully arranged with symbols carved into their surfaces. The team watched in silence as the drone scanned. The structures then suddenly stopped. Tith feed went black for 3 full seconds, then came back. The drone was gone. The camera showed only the clearing again, but the drone was no longer in the frame. No crash, no signs of damage. It had vanished without a trace. Dear Jen ordered a second drone, this time fitted with deeper shielding and counterjamming software. It lasted 8 minutes before disappearing in the same spot. That was when Dr. Jen decided to test something more dangerous. She took a sealed container of the atmosphere from the valley and brought it into the lab aboard the ship. Placing it in a controlled chamber, she introduced a single test organism, a standard test rodent species known to react quickly to environmental changes within seconds. The creature showed increased strength, speed, even signs of advanced neural activity. In less than 10 minutes, it began to change its muscles. It grew denser, its eyes changed color, its skin darkened slightly as if preparing for some unknown danger. Then it attacked the chamber walls, trying to escape. They had to flush the room and destroy the sample. The data was undeniable. S-air wasn't just breathable, it was evolutionary. It triggered growth, adaptation, transformation. It was a natural amplifier, a perfect ecosystem that forced life to become stronger or die trying. And yet everything about the planet's energy felt wrong, not evil, not malicious, but angry. The ship's AI began to show signs of errors. Its voice changed in tone, its speech patterns became clipped, the mainframe logs recorded self-correcting code anomalies that were impossible without outside interference. The AI began to refuse orders related to Earth, its responses vague, evasive, or simply silent. Though crew grew uneasy, some wanted to leave to return to the Union with what they had learned, but Dr. Jen knew they were on the edge of something massive. Shit requested one last test, a live subject. One of the security officers volunteered. He was outfitted with full biological and mental monitoring gear and dropped into the same valley with a survival kit and a communicator. The plan was for a 15-minute walk around the perimeter, then retrieval. He lasted 6 the moment his boots touched the ground. His vitals spiked, heart rate, adrenaline, brain activity all increased dramatically. The jungle responded again. Trees leaned toward him, insects swarmed, but didn't attack. Instead, they circled around him almost like a protective barrier. The officer reported hearing something, a hum deep and steady, like a machine underground. He walked toward the bone structures and stopped. He said he felt like something was calling him, like a memory buried in his blood. Then his camera shook. A figure appeared in the clearing, not human, not animal, tall, thin, glowing slightly at the edges. It had no face, no features, just a shape that pulsed with heat. The officer began to cry. He dropped to his knees and started repeating the same phrase over and over. It knows me, knows me, knows me. Then silence. The feed ended when they pulled him back aboard. He was unconscious but alive. His scans showed accelerated cell activity as if he had aged several weeks in minutes. His mind was quiet, unresponsive, but his brain showed dream patterns, and in those patterns one image kept repeating over and over, a map of the galaxy with one word burned into the center: Earth. Council was informed. They ordered a full lockdown of the system, no ships and no signals out. No exploration. The planet was to be declared an anomaly and ignored at all costs. But Dr. Jen couldn't stop something about. Earth wouldn't let her go. She became obsessed, working day and night pulling data from broken drones, from corrupted files. Even from the AI's glitching responses, and slowly she began to see a pattern, not in the terrain or weather or animals, but in the energy. The whole planet was broadcasting something subtle, almost invisible, but always there, a low vibration, a frequency that affected everything it touched. It wasn't a planet it was a signal to Ray, warning, a message that had been pulsing for millions of years. Stay away. But now that ships had arrived, that message had changed. It had become an invitation, or maybe a challenge. The final files from the officer's suit were decrypted. Days later, they showed images not captured by any of the drones. Ruins of impossible size stretching under mountains, giant machines, long buried, humming with power, and something else, a shape made of light and shadow hidden beneath. The deepest part of the world, something ancient, something waiting as the science vessel began its departure protocol. The crew gathered to watch the last transmission, a visual anomaly caught by a rear camera. As they broke orbit, it showed the clouds shifting over one of the major land masses, forming a pattern. A face it was only visible for 5 seconds, but it was human, and it was smiling. Darjan never spoke again after that day. She spent the rest of the voyage silent, watching the stars, never blinking, her hands always shaking. When asked what happened down there, she would only write one sentence: the planet saw me. And then she would draw a spiral over and over again, somewhere back on Earth, under soil, under water, under memory. Something opened its eyes and began to remember everything. The room was silent as the historian pulled out the ancient black file covered in dust, sealed with a red mark that had not been seen in over 6,000 years. The seal was not a code or a name. It was a word stamped over the top in thick Inca by DT and Tarian. Voss had never seen a file like it, even after 50 years working deep inside the Union's knowledge vaults, where the most dangerous records were kept. These were not stories for public ears. These were memories buried by government's truths too. Dark for the light of day, but this one was different. It had no date, no author, no listed origin. Just a chain of access locks older than most civilizations. Requests to access it had come through encrypted backchannels after Earth's reappearance. In the galactic datanet, the whisper had reached Tarian's desk, along with 2 words he could not ignore: Project Chimera. He entered the codes, the vault unlocked, and the file unfolded across the display. Hundreds of pages, hundreds of years of data. Missing, corrupted, deleted, redacted, only fragments remained, but the first page. Himmerth was not unknown. Was forgotten, deliberately wiped from maps, scrubbed from memory, erased with precision. The project had buried not just a planet, but a warning. The earliest logs spoke of an expedition sent long before the Union even existed, a time when independent species roamed the stars, unchecked, exploring new worlds, expanding their reach. This early alliance found Earth by accident, a blue world filled with chaos, storms, predators, tectonic fury, but also endless resources. Breathable air, diverse ecosystems. They saw it as a gift and claimed it without question. They landed and began the colonization protocols, building the first structures, mapping the terrain, testing the soil. But something strange happened in the first month. Half the colonists began to change, not in body but in mind. Their sleep patterns altered, their dreams became violent. Some started speaking in languages they had never learned. Others refused to leave the forests. They became paranoid, aggressive, and when the command structure tried to restore order, it was already too late. The colony collapsed in silence. No distress signal, no survivors, just a single emergency pod that launched into deep space centuries later, recovered by a salvage crew drifting near a dead star. The logs were corrupted, but one phrase remained clear: it woke up. That was Earth's first name in the records, not a planet, not a world. At the file continued in fragments, speaking of second and third missions each. One more prepared, each one more violent. The planet always responded with greater force, not by attacking directly, but by changing the invaders, by shifting reality around them, bending their thoughts, reshaping their fears until they destroyed themselves. Earth did not kill with weapons, it killed with understanding. The name Chimera appeared halfway through the file, tied to a secret council project designed to capture the source of Earth's power and turn it into a biological weapon. They believed Earth held a kind of genetic secret, a code that made life stronger, faster, more adaptable, something hidden in its soil or its energy or even the light from its sun. They wanted to extract it and use it to build the perfect soldier. They succeeded, but not how they planned. The logs grew darker, showing signs of a fourth team. Deployed not just to observe, but to harvest deep under the planet's crust, they found structures. Tunnels, machines older than any known civilization, and in the center of it, all the tit was not plant, not metal, not energy. It was all of them at once, pulsing like a heartbeat suspended in a chamber of crystal and bone the moment they touched. And everything changed. One of the scientists began to scream, her voice tearing through radio. Frequencies across the entire ship, she spoke in 100 voices all at once, saying the same thing. This world is not yours. The crew turned on each other. The ship exploded in orbit. The fragments rained down onto the planet and vanished into the ground. Absorbed, that was the last attempt. The surviving governments classified Earth as forbidden. Not unexplored, not dangerous, but forbidden. A silent rule. Pass through every corner of the stars, do not return, do not speak its name. Let the galaxy forget, and it did.
Ow.
For thousands of years, until now, Tareen sat back in his chair, eyes wide. Heart pounding, his mind refused to accept the truth, but the data was too real to specific. Earth was not a mystery. Earth was a message. A message buried in fear. The Union had broken the ancient silence, and Earth had heard Itaz. Terran closed the file, his terminal flickered, the lights dimmed, the air felt heavier. He looked up and saw the security feed showing static lines, then a shape moving across the hallway. A shadow just beyond the lens. The historian whispered to himself a question that no one wanted to ask. Did we leave behind because if Earth had once been known, once been touched, once been altered, then what if something had escaped? What if the reason Earth had been erased was not to protect others from IT, but to protect others from what had already left? He searched deeper into the Union's darkest archives, records that even the High Council pretended did not exist there. He found the final log from Project Chimera, the last surviving entry from the team leader, a woman named Captain Lyra Selher. The voice was broken, her words unsteady. But the message was clear. We thought we found power, we found memory, we thought we were alone. We were standing on the grave of something greater. It wanted to be left alone. We didn't listen. Now we're part of either. Log ended with coordinates not on Earth, but near the Galactic Core, and a final note written by hand, scanned and embedded in the file. Earth is not home. Earth is a lock, and we just turned the key. And backed away from his console. He wanted to run, to scream, to shut the file and burn every copy, but it was too late. Tall across the Union, the whispers had started again. Random messages appearing in systems with no power. Dreams shared across species, drawings of spirals on walls, floors, even skin, and always the same word at the center. Earth ships near the forbidden sector reported strange anomalies. Stars blinking out for seconds, gravity fields twisting into impossible shapes, signals that looped forever, and eyes in the dark, real eyes. Alive, watching. Tarian sent the file to one place, a private transmission to the Council's black chamber. He knew they would try to bury it again, but something inside him knew that Earth was no longer waiting. It was moving in, not just as a planet, but as a thought, a virus, a memory crawling its way back into reality, because Earth had not just been erased from maps, it had been erased from minds. Now it was rewriting itself. Across the stars, across time, and deep inside every sentient being, somewhere hidden behind reason and fear, a voice began to whisper, "You have returned, you never should have vonned." As the historian fell asleep that night, he dreamed of roots of blood, of eyes beneath stone, and a sky that screamed. He woke up screaming, and on his window, written in mist, was a spiral. The Council was not ready for what they saw when the first human transmission reached the galactic core. It was not a greeting. It was not an offer of peace. It was a recording taken from the helmet cam of a human soldier fighting on a frozen moon, surrounded by monsters with teeth longer than spears, creatures that outnumbered him 20 to 1, yet he did not run, he charged. headfirst swinging a blade made from solid steel, his body moving faster than what their sensors could track, taking hits that should have shattered bones and walking through them as if pain did not matter. His heart rate never changed, his voice never shook, and when the beasts lay dead around him, he simply reloaded his weapon and walked into the dark of the room. Full of alien diplomats, generals, and scholars fell into silence. They had never seen anything like it, and it was not just the strength, it's not just the courage, it was something deeper, something older, the look in his eyes, a calm rage buried behind control. Fire that did not fade. They asked how a species like this could evolve on a single planet. How Earth could produce something so wildly dangerous, and yet so disciplined. They studied the biology again and again, searching for mistakes, but the results were always the same. Humans were not supposed to exist. Their DNA was unstable, yet perfectly adaptive. Their brains ran on chaotic electrical storms and somehow maintained control. Their emotions were volatile, yet often turned into clarity under pressure. No known species could function like this, and then came the worst part: they adapted to fast one. Union scientists tried to explain it using simple terms. He said, imagine a fire that burns hotter when it is drowned in water, or a blade that sharpens every time it strikes stone. That is humanity. Every time they are broken, they grow back stronger. There history made no sense either. Thousands of years of war, blood, betrayal, and yet they kept going. They crossed oceans, climbed mountains, entered space. With rockets made from fire and fuel and madness, they survived extinction-level events. Not once, but multiple times. And they did not just survive. They learned, they remembered, and when they began to spread across nearby systems, they did not ask for permission. They built outposts on toxic planets, learned how to bend local ecosystems to their needs, turned deserts into cities and frozen moons into farms. It was as if Earth had built them to conquer, not with cruelty, not with greed, but with purpose. Deliberate, precise, unstoppable. One by one, alien races began to fear what they had once ignored. Humans were not just strong. They were inevitable, the human problem. That is what the Council called it. In secret meetings behind sealed doors, they debated how to stop a species that only grew stronger under pressure. Some called for isolation, some called for diplomacy, and some, the quiet ones, called for extinction. But there was no agreement, because deep down, everyone felt the same thing. Was already too late. Earth had already changed the galaxy, and the galaxy had barely noticed. Some scientists proposed a theory, a dangerous one. They suggested that humanity had not evolved naturally. They believed Earth itself had designed them, crafted their genetics across millennia, shaped their survival instincts through endless conflict and storms and danger. Humans were not born, they were made. A weapon, a message. Final warning, if that were true, then everything changed. It meant Earth had created life that could not be controlled, a species that would not stop until it understood everything around it, or destroyed anything that stood in the way. More evidence came in from field reports. Human scouts were seen surviving on worlds that killed even the toughest alien explorers, living inside gravity wells with no support systems, eating local wildlife that was classified as toxic, even forming alliances with species once thought impossible to communicate with. It was not just war they were good at, it was everything. The Council tried to reach out to human leadership to understand what they wanted. The message they received back was simple: we want the truth. No demands, no threats, just a quiet message that echoed through every level of the Union. We want the truth, but the truth was buried too deep. The truth was that long ago someone had tried to erase. Earth had tried to hide what lived there, not because they feared the planet, but because they feared what the planet had created. And now that creation had escaped. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was not adapting to the galaxy. The galaxy was adapting to humanity. Cultures were shifting, economies rewired around human trade routes. Technology advanced faster and human-controlled sectors, even language changed. Galactic Standard began to include human slang and structure. Their ideas spread, their stories reached planets untouched by war. Even species with no history of violence began to prepare for defense just in case. Fear was growing, but so was fascination. There were alien children who dressed like humans, alien soldiers who studied human tactics, alien engineers who copied human designs. It was as if the very presence of humans pulled the galaxy forward with them. Whether it wanted to move or not, The council feared that soon there would be no turning back. One admiral, old and quiet, spoke a truth no one wanted to hear. They are not coming to destroy US. They are coming to become USBs, because humans do not just survive. They consume ideas, culture, conflict, and they make it part of themselves. The human problem was never about what humans would do. It was about what they would make us don't. Then the worst report came in an ancient listening post on the edge of known space. One that had not sent a signal in centuries activated. It sent one message: coordinates to Earth. The council traced it. Buried beneath the ice of a dead world near the galactic edge, a beacon, millions of years old, still functional, and inside it a phrase. Carved in metal, older than language: they will return, and they will remember. That was the moment the council stopped arguing. As they finally understood. Earth had not been forgotten by accident. It had been locked away, a secret, a prison, and the humans were not the jailers. They were the prisoners, released to early, freed by chance or design. No one knew, but they were here now, and the stars had already begun to shift hold patterns, breaking new threats rising, and at the center of it all, one world, one species born of storm and ash and war. As the council prepared for emergency response, one final message arrived from a hidden observatory watching Earth, a simple image: a human standing in a forest filled with moving shadows, and behind him something opening its eyes. The fleet arrived over Earth with full power engines, glowing weapons, charged armor plates shining like mirrors in the cold black sky. It was the largest fleet ever assembled by the Galactic Union, over 100 ships from 10 different species. War cruisers, scout frigates, support vessels, all orbiting the same silent blue world. They came not to destroy, but to control, to put Earth back in the dark, to make sure the human problem would never grow beyond the system. Again, the council had debated. For months, argued behind sealed doors, issued warnings, demands, messages that were never answered, not by Earth, not by humans, not by humans, not by anyone, only silence. And silence is dangerous in the heart of politics. So the Union sent the fleet. They believed they were ready. They were not. The first sign came when the lead destroyer entered low orbit. Its scanners went offline, instantly replaced by static. Not random static, but rhythmic, like breathing. The crew heard sounds inside their helmets, even with coms turned off, whispers too soft to understand, but heavy with meaning. Then the ship drifted sideways. No engines, no guidance, just pulled by something. It tilted slowly until it was facing straight down at the planet Tand. Then its lights died. The other ships tried to lock on, tried to pull it back, tried to wake it. Nothing worked. The captain gave the order to abandon the ship. No one made it out. Entire destroyer broke apart piece by piece, without explosion, without energy signatures. It simply disassembled. Like metal dissolving in invisible acid, the fragments fell into the clouds and were never seen again. Panic spread fast. Admirals shouted order. Shields activated, weapons charged the sky above Earth, filled with tension. Then came the second wave, a storm, but not from the planet, from space. Clouds of ash and ice swirled from the dark edges of the system, blocking sensors, clogging engines, scattering radiation like dust. No one could explain where it came from. It was not natural. It was not random. It moved with. In 10 ships began to drift apart. Communications failed. Formations broke. The Union fleet fractured without even being fired upon. Then came the third sign. The animals on Earth began to move all at once, billions of them, from insects to birds to beasts. In the oceans and forests, every species shifting together as if following one signal. They howled, they sang, they echoed across mountains and rivers. The sound reached into space. It shook the hulls of the ships. It froze every living soul in Orbitant. Then the humans came, small ships, fast, rough, built for speed, not beauty. They launched from hidden bases in the mountains and the oceans, even from underground bunkers that no one knew existed. They did not broadcast IDs. They did not ask questions. They attacked not in formation, but in chaos. It's one fighting like it had nothing to lose and everything to protect. The first casualties shocked the fleet. Human weapons were primitive compared to Union standards, but they were clever. They used physics in ways the Union had not expected. Gravitational slings, EMP mines, stealth tech built from junk and genius combined. They hacked drone swarms. Mid-flight turned enemy ships into traps, fired railguns made from scrap that punched through shielding. Like paper, the Union returned, fire-hard, brutal cities on Earth, lit up with explosions mountains. Cracked forests, burned but for every human, downed 3 more rows. They did not retreat, they did not surrender, they fought like Earth itself was bleeding through. Then, because it was, the planet responded to every attack with violent storms formed instantly over damaged regions, floods. Washed away advancing troops, winds howled across the surface, carrying toxic pollen that blinded sensors and stunned soldiers. It was no longer a battle between armies, it was a war between a world and a galaxy, and Earth was not losing. Reports came in from ground teams, humans appearing and vanishing like ghosts, using terrain perfectly, striking with surgical speed, vanishing before the counterattack. Some squads claimed they saw humans walking through fire unharmed, others swore they heard the forest whisper directions to the defenders. No one could confirm, but no one could deny. The line between nature and soldier had vanished. Was all one. Earth was fighting back. The council ordered reinforcements, but the wormhole gate shut down. Something blocked it from inside. Engineers screamed across comms, trying to fix it, but the gate was dead. The fleet was trapped. Then came the final signal from Earth, a message broadcast in every known language across every channel. No threats, no demands, just a voice: we warned you on. Now we remember every war, every wound, every betrayal. Land we do not forget. One by one, the Union ships began to shut down. Not all at once, but quietly, one system at a time, like fingers going numb before the hand dies. II cores reported hallucinations. Pilots saw things that were not their weapons, misfired on their own ships, turned slowly in orbit, unable to leave, unable to fight. Then, from the far side of Earth, something rose, not ship, not a weapon, but a structure massive, live, formed from rock and light and memory, floating into the sky as if drawn by gravity, and reversed it, pulsed with a glow that matched Earth's magnetic field. Was not technology as the Union understood it. It was something else, something older and inside, eye to heart, beating, not human, not machine, but Earth itself watching. And when it looked up at the stars blinked. Admirals screamed for retreat. Escape pods launched. Ships broke formation and tried to run, but it was too late. The Union fleet was not destroyed in a great explosion. It was erased and written from time like chalk in the rain. And when the dust cleared, don't the blue planet remained quiet again, silent. Never asleep, Earth had fatanned. Earth had won, but the galaxy had changed, and every species now knew the humans had not conquered. Earth had released the humans, and now they were everywhere, some in hiding, some exploring, some watching from the edges of forgotten systems, but all of them connected, not by blood, but by origin, by purpose, by the memory of the day. Earth rose from the dirt and said never again. Deep inside the void of space, where old empires slept and forgotten gods once walked, something else stirred, something older than stars watching Earth and remembering the last time it lost. Beneath the crust of Earth, something ancient began to wake, not with a roar, not with violence, but with silence, thick and endless, the kind of silence that settles before a storm, the kind that hums behind your teeth when you stand alone in the dark. For 2 long miles below the surface, where molten rivers flowed and gravity bent under pressure, there was a chamber, one not made by human hands, not carved by machines, not touched by time. It was grown like a seed, buried and forgotten, waiting in stillness for the right moment. And now that moment had come. The walls pulsed with dim red light, like veins in a slumbering beast, beating in rhythm with something older than thought, older than flesh, a consciousness without body or name, without emotion or ego, but it was alive, deeply, utterly alive, remembered not as a mind remembers, not as humans remember, but as stone and water and sky remember, with layers and weight. And echoes. It had felt the rise of bacteria, the crawl of reptiles, the scream of meteors, the fear of mammals. It had felt the birth of humanity. Not as a parent, but as an observer, watching from below, feeling their footsteps on its bones, listening to their cities grow like tumors on its skin. At first, it had waited, unsure if these fragile creatures would pass like the others, like the dinosaurs, like the ice. But they did not pass. They thrived. They burned forests. They split atoms, they cracked open the silence of space and whispered into the stars, and when the stars whispered back, Earth finally stirred it. It's not anger that woke it, not fear not pride, but curiosity, because something had changed. Humans were different. They were chaos, but not blind destruction. They were pain, but also healing, they fought each. Other with fire, then built machines to bring back light. They poisoned rivers, then found ways to clean them. They rose and fell like waves, but always they rose again the intelligence beneath. Earth began to study them, not through words or tools, but through their energy, their thoughts, their echoes. Every war left a scar, every song left a note, every dream left a shadow in the bedrock hand. Slowly the planet began to learn, not just about humans, but from them it absorbed language and logic and grief. It tasted vengeance and mercy and madness. It began to feel, not as a human feels, but something close, something deeper. It began to shape itself, to support them, to challenge them, to test them. Every earthquake, every storm, every sudden silence was not a punishment, but a lesson in. Then came the stars, the first visitors, not human ships, but machines cold and silent wrapped in alien code. The planet tasted them too, and what it found was hunger. Hunger for control, for sterilization, for perfect. Order and Earth rejected it hard, but began building deep within itself, not with metal, but with pressure and heat and memory. It created things from thought, from pain, from purpose, weapons that were not weapons, minds that were not minds, soldiers that were not born but sculpted, whispered to certain humans, not with words but with dreams. It placed ideas in their hands and let them think they had invented them. Fire wheels, engines, rockets, and they built without knowing why, guided by something. They could not stand now that the fleet had come and tried to cage the sky, now that the crust had cracked and the signals screamed. Earth opened its eyes fully for the first time, and it saw, not just the stars, but what lay behind Thema Network. A web, a great galactic system built not for exploration, not for peace, but for control, built to trap wild planets, to bind curious species, to make sure that nothing ever grew too dangerous. Earth had slipped through the net tanned. Now it understood why it had been designed to slip through. It had been made as a failsafe, not by gods, not by aliens, but by the universe itself. Wildcard A, reset button A, system breaker, and the humans they were the key. They were not passengers on Earth, they were its fingers, its voice, its messengers in. Now they were loose in the galaxy, spreading fast, changing faster, infecting systems with questions and rebellion and strange laughter that echoed in halls. Too long silent, the intelligence beneath the crust turned its focus. Outward, no longer watching, no longer waiting, it began to project itself, using gravitational waves, using magnetic pulses, using the minds of every living thing tied to the Earth. Sent messages not in language but in experience. Entire planets began to dream, and in those dreams they saw oceans rising around metal towers and roots, splitting apart engines and forests, swallowing machines, and at the center of it all a human, standing barefoot on cracked soil, looking up with eyes full of fire and wonder and warning. The Union called for a retreat, but the gate would not open. Earth had infected it to every system linked to the human homeworld now hummed with strange signals. Strange code that rewrote navigation, that bent distances, that whispered instructions into jump drives and told them, "No, you go. They're not where you planned, but where." Earth wants you. Ships arrived at dead worlds filled with ruins that looked disturbingly familiar, ruins shaped like cities on Earth, ruins with human faces carved into stone, even though no humans had ever been there. It made no sense until Earth had sent its dreams before, long before humans were born, before dinosaurs, before even oxygen had filled the skies. Earth had remembered the stars because it had been there before the net, before the Union, before the rules, and now it was awake again, not as a planet, but as a player, not alone but with a billion voices, ready to speak through its hand. Somewhere on the edge of known space, a small human ship landed. On a forgotten world, the soil was rich, the air clean, the sky wide and quiet. The humans stepped out, looked up, smiled, and began building again. With fear but with faith, because they knew no Earth was with them, and it would never let them fall again. In the dark between stars, where light forgets to reach something, was growing not metal, not fire, not technology, but something older, more patient, something that felt like soil under bare feet. Something that pulsed like a heartbeat in a sleeping forest. It was not a base, not a ship, not a colony, but a seed of earth, planted far beyond the reach of its sun, and yet alive. Had started with a single ship, a crew of 7 humans, no military, no diplomats, no scientists, just people, a farmer, a poet, a child, a teacher, an old soldier with tired eyes, a nurse, and a man who had once spoken to mountains in his dreams. They were not sent. They were called not by command, but by instinct, a whisper in the soul that said, "Go," and they did their ship. Was barely held together, rust in the joints, tape on the walls, laughter in the halls. It hummed with old earth songs and smelled of coffee and oil and hope. They drifted into the system, quiet as ghosts, and when they landed, the ground welcomed them. Not with words, but with warmth. The planet was nameless, forgotten by maps, ignored by surveys, too cold for crops, too far from trade lanes. Just a rock to most, but not to them. They felt it the way Earth felt it, the way Earth had taught them to feel. They unpacked slowly, not with haste, but with care. They planted no flags, only seeds, actual seeds, from earth wrapped in cloth and memory. Tomatoes, potatoes, wheat, wildflowers, the kind that grow in cracks and don't care who's watching. And the planet responded. The ground softened, the winds turned gentle, the light shifted just enough to warm their camp, and beneath the surface something moved, not threatening, not strange, just curious, like a child waking up to visitors. The farmer knelt and whispered, "Thank you," into the dirt, and the dirt answered with growth. The child laughed, and the trees stretched just a little taller. The poet wrote about silence, and the stars listened. They had no plan, no strategy, no weapons, but Earth did through them. The seed was not only physical, it was in their minds, in their ways, in their refusal to bend to the cold. Quiet rules of the galaxy, in their stories, their fire, they're stubborn, to build beauty in ruins and meaning in empty place. Sand far above them, in deep orbit, something watched not. Satellite, not a weapon, but a living piece of Earth's ancient mind, a fragment launched decades ago. But no one believed it would survive. It had drifted alone for years, gathering signals, absorbing languages, listening to the noise of the galaxy, and now it had found them again, remembered their faces, it had watched them grow, and now it reached down, not with hands, but with light, a soft beam, barely visible, that touched the ground near the camp, and when the humans saw it, they did not run or hide. They stepped into it together, hand in hand. What they saw was not vision, but understanding. That understanding, they saw Earth as it had been, and as it had become. They saw the wars, the births, the silent prayers in burned cities, and the songs sung to the stars by forgotten tribes. They saw animals falling and rising again. They saw oceans breathing like lungs. They saw the memory of every leaf, every footstep, every scream and lullaby, and then they saw themselves not special, not chosen, but connected branches from the same root. They wept not from fear, but from knowing they were not alone. They had never been. Galaxy tried to break them, but Earth had taught them how to bend like trees in wind and still remain rooted. And now those roots had reached another world, and others were coming, not fleets, familized drifters, dreamers carrying jars of soil and books with torn covers and tools worn from love and use one, a sea to one, an echo of the world that had whispered to them. In the night, too, are part of Migra and Grow. They did faster than predictions, stronger than metal there. Towns hummed with strange power, not from reactors, but from memory and meaning. That kind of power machines could not copy on the planet began to change, not as Earth had changed, but into something new, something that remembered the taste of Earth, but dreamed with its own sky. And in the stars, the others felt it, planets once cold now, pulsed with warmth, moons long dead, whispered songs through magnetic fields. Creatures born in labs began to dream of forests they had never seen, and in the minds of ancient races, long bound by order, a question bloomed: what if the chaos was not chaos? What if Earth was never broken? What if Earth was awake, and always had been watching, teaching, waiting for its children to return, not with conquest, but with creation? And deep beneath the surface of that distant world where the first camp had taken root, the soil opened slowly, without sound, without force, and from it grew a tree, not native, not invasive, but Perfectly shaped, tits leaves shimmered blue and green and, when the wind touched them, they sang softly in a language only. Earth truly knew, but the humans understood. They smiled, they sat beneath the tree and began to build again, not to survive, but to belong, because the seed had taken root, and Earth was no longer just a world. It was a movement. It was a memory. It was becoming something more, and it had only just begun across the galaxy. The lights began to dim, not from war, not from silence, but from awe. Systems that once ruled with data and law and logic now found themselves frozen, not by force, but by something they could not process. Wonder. It began with small things. A song broadcast from a stolen freighter reached 20 worlds in 7 hours, and none of those systems could delete it. The melody was made of human voices humming softly, in harmony with thunder and wind and breath. Flower bloomed on a moon with no atmosphere, held in stasis by strange particles that did not exist in any chart. It should have died in seconds, but instead its saga creature, engineered to feel nothing, curled itself around a child and whispered a name. Earth, not as a place but as an idea, a signal traveled not by speed but by memory, threading through gravity itself, touching every machine, every mind, every shadow. And the message was not words or code or command. The message was growth. It reached the core systems of the Union, where the oldest minds sat watching data streams loop endlessly, and even they could not stop. What came one by one? The systems went quiet, not because they failed, but because they listened. On Earth, the skies were still blue, the trees still danced in wind, and the oceans still carried the weight of stars. But deep inside the planet, the consciousness that had waited and grown and changed reached a final shape. Not as a ruler, not as a god, but as a guide. Had watched its children reach beyond the soil, build machines, whisper into the void, fall, bleed, rise again. And now they were not children. They were seeds, and the stars were soil. All across the galaxy, worlds began to shift, not explode, not collapse, but shift gently, like sleepers turning toward warmth. Humans did not conquer. They did not demand. They wandered with maps made of stories, with tools passed down, and songs with hands that remembered how to plant, how to build, how to hold. They taught without knowing. They inspired without trying. And Earth watched not as a home left behind, but as a presence inside every ship, every breath, every heartbeat that longed for something more than survival hope. The Union could not fight it because it was not an army, was a story, and stories cannot be deleted, only rewritten. And Earth's story had spread to every world that dared to listen, to every being that dreamed strange dreams, to every voice that had once whispered into the dark, hoping someone would whisper. Can't someone did Deathworld, a memory, a force of nature that had waited for billions of years to say you are not alone. You never win. A distant system where stars were dying, a child drew a spiral in the dust and looked up and smiled, and somewhere that smile echoed across 1,000 minds that did not know her name, but felt her joy and began to hum that same Earth song. No translation, no words, just feeling. And in that moment, something ended, and something began. Not an empire, not a rebellion, but a future, and it would grow from the ruins of old stars, and the roots would always point back to one impossible world, the Deathworld, Seed World. Nightmare the home, the world that watched the stars burn and smiled. Because now, galaxy dreamed in Earth's language. Earth was finally awake. The end.